Hey, deserving listeners, Ultimatum, let's watch.
Whatever it was that you wanted to do in this experience. And I thought that you could potentially be falling in love with Kyle. And I understand, but I did feel like that, and we did decide to cross that line.
Haley is heading into that disclosure, which is good. And good that she's disclosing it and doing it under thoughtful, non-alcohol induced circumstances. And Haley, in her preamble, says, because I thought you and Kyle were getting together or something. And I'm trying to remember why Haley would, maybe just Haley saw some things or thought something, I don't know. So that's one thing. And maybe that's true, but I think it would be more responsible for Haley just to say, here was some influence, but I can't blame or attribute what happened between me and Megan to what I thought was going on between you and Kyle. Because Pilar and Kyle were not actually connecting much at all, really. I mean, as friends. I mean, in the beginning, Pilar was really going after Kyle, romantically and sexually as well. I mean, define really going after, just in the way that I think a lot of people do in the show.
Was it one time?
It was not one time.
Okay, so it sounds like sex, right? So Pilar is asking for more clarification. Haley is saying, I had sex more than once with Megan. I wonder if Haley's going to say we declared we were in love with each other.
Can I ask how many?
Will that help the conversation?
It's a great question to ask. It's a way of checking in with the question asker, because it might not be relevant and it might just hurt. It's normal to ask those kinds of questions. It's normal to be curious, but when I am facilitating these kind of conversations, I will ask that very question or a similar question of, well, let's take a second here, Haley. Whether or not you want to answer this question, I would ask Pilar, like, it's normal to be curious about, but you have to ask yourself if it's actually safe for you to know that information. And if you don't know the answer to that question, let's put that off for a bit. But if you have to know and you feel relatively okay with the consequences of having those details, maybe not this question, but sometimes the people in Pilar's shoes will say, did you orgasm, or exactly where, did you enjoy yourself? Was it better than with me? These kinds of questions. And sometimes those are important to know, and it's painful, and there's no way around it. But I also appreciate that Haley doesn't just lie, right? That's often the case. In fact, anecdotally, that's usually what happens, is Haley will feel bad and also feel like no one will be able to find out, likely. So I'll just, maybe it was 10 times, and it's like, well, I already said it was more than once, so, well, it was only 2. But instead of doing that, and instead of just answering it in a way that doesn't take into account the possibility that it could hurt Pilar, she asks, is that important? Because I'll tell you if you need to know, but are you sure that you want to know, really?
I mean, I wasn't like counting every time.
Well, that should be an answer right there, right? Because it sounds like a number of times, right?
Like, do you have an emotional connection with her?
Yeah, and kudos to Haley for just saying it, and kudos for Pilar for holding it together and getting the information that is relevant. I don't know what Haley at this point is deciding, because it seems like a lot of them, once they were back together, things would change maybe for them. So maybe Haley's like, yeah, it was a thing, and we had sex, and we connected emotionally, but I don't want to be with Megan, I want to be with you, if you'll have me, or something along those lines, or I'm still thinking about it. There's other possibility that this is Haley leading up to, I think I want to break up, and I think I want to be with Megan.
does that mean?
It's a great question. It's hard. This is like the worst, right? For both people, particularly for Pilar. And on reality TV that we watch on this channel, it's exceedingly rare for someone to be able to sift through all of that and the impulse and the undifferentiation, the fusion, the anger, and the hostility to break through and actually try to cut to the chase. Because ultimately that is the question. What does that mean? In other words, does that mean we're done, or what does that mean? Once Pilar knows that, then she can kind of deal with it. If Haley says, well, we had a connection, we had sex a number of times, but that's over and now I want to be with you, then Pilar would have to face, okay, well, what does that mean for me? But there's no use contemplating that if Haley is breaking up, right? So Pilar's like, well, is this the end? Because if it's the end, then I don't need to think about how I'm going to cope with that moving forward in terms of being in a relationship with someone that had that experience.
Do you love her?
It's interesting that it's the ultimatum giver of Haley, right? If you're Pilar, you're probably not predicting this. I don't remember any indication that Pilar thought this would happen. If anything, Pilar seemed to be like really eager to have a hall pass, and was the one that was, at least in the interviews and everything, was seriously wondering if this was the right choice. So that's interesting. And it's kind of interesting that Haley really fell in love with another, fell in love. So there's been hints that, to a lesser extent, I think, these two have a similar, in one theme anyway, the dynamic between Dana and Megan, in that Haley is usually the one that is more out there and assertive, and Pilar is not. Because Pilar was actually, I don't know if I showed this bit, but Pilar was recounting having been with Kyle and was not really complaining, but pointing out that Kyle is very open and agreeable to a fault often. And Pilar was telling Haley, I kind of know what it feels like to be you, in a more exaggerated way, and it didn't feel good to be with someone that was so agreeable and just seemed to not really be there. I'm putting words in Pilar's mouth, but so that, because they didn't tell us much as to what their dynamic was coming in. It's on the surface, it seemed like everything was mostly great, Anyway, but I think we're learning that it was more than that. I think a little bit anyway. But I think it is evidence that they were relatively functional given how they're having this conversation. I'm trying to think of and they've been together 10 years, since they were 18. Their first real romantic relationship. This is crushing, right? And the fact that they're both not playing games, they're not blaming, they're not getting hostile, they're both feeling the feeling. I mean, this is like rough, So the fact that both of them are managing this extremely well says something, I think, about their relationship, But anyway, so yeah. So Haley is like, yeah, I'm in love. And I think this is when Pilar realizes, oh my God, it's over. Now maybe Pilar will have to ask, so are you saying it's over, just to be clear? And Haley goes over to her to show empathy and compassion, and she doesn't want that right now, which is fine. And Haley allows that. So it's all just sucks, All of us have been here, and maybe some of us have been here a lot, If you date enough and you get involved enough, then these, one way or another, the way I think of it is that unless you find your person in high school or something, then 9 90% plus of your relationships, depending on how many relationships you have, are going to end at some point before you die. And what often people are looking for is that one that lasts forever, meaning that it lasts beyond death. And therefore, this is a very weird way of putting it. It's hard to put into words, actually, the way I see it. But the conclusion is that most, if not the vast majority of relationships, will have a moment like this where one person is breaking up with the other person. And so whereas I think often as we head into relationships, particularly long-term relationships, we assume it's going to be forever, when, especially in the first few months, few years, the assumption should actually be that there's a high likelihood that it will end at some point and someone's going to get hurt. I'm not saying this right. Anyway, point is that, I guess another conclusion you could say is that the vast majority of relationships that happen, at least in my neck of the woods, will have a moment like this. Because the odds are that any committed love, long-term relationship is not likely to last forever. It's likely to end. And that's okay. That is, relationships have an egg timer, or people fall out of love, even quietly. It doesn't have to be over conflict or anger or cheating or something. So anyway, but yeah. And kudos to them for showing us this. They could have done it off camera and had to recreate it. That looked real, right? And given the way Pilar was talking, and maybe even Pilar partly sees it this way, this could be a good thing for both of them. Because Pilar was seemingly wanting to be single because she'd never had that experience before, and was not wanting to, she didn't know if she could commit to Haley because she hadn't had enough experiences. So, maybe this is just a necessary pain that they're going through, and maybe they'll get back together. I guess I'm still kind of pulling for them, but I guess I'm also pulling for Haley and Megan. They seem really cute as well, so who knows. But honestly, as I say that out loud, I think Megan shows signs that she's at the very beginning of discovering who she is, whereas for Haley, I think she is further down that road a little bit. Maybe not a lot, but I think it's significant. Just the little bits that I've seen, I think Haley, now that doesn't mean that Haley and Megan are doomed somehow, but I wouldn't be surprised if Haley and Megan do give it a shot, if Megan's growth and discovering who she is has some effect on their relationship, one way or the other. I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself.
I don't know what to do with this information. Please don't touch me.
This is half joking, but also half not, but maybe don't break up with someone on a 20th store balcony. I just had a flash thought when they panned away and she's like right again. It's half joke, half not. And the half joke part is terrible. I don't even know why I'm saying it. And maybe I'll edit this out.
I feel I did this.
You did this?
Yeah. Like, what if I had proposed to you, and if I had made you feel seen and heard? I kept saying my worst fear was that I would get to a point that I was ready and you were falling in love with someone else.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Yeah. Heartbreaking.
And I said that. Now it's happening. Like, what the fuck?
I'm sorry.
Were you manifesting?
So I will absolutely praise both of them. There's a lot of health and differentiation. There's so many impulses that I'm quite sure are going on for them. Haley could start to defend herself or try to calm her down or something. Or, because it's viable for Haley to say, it wouldn't be appropriate to say at this moment, but you had I asked you to marry me, and if you would have said yes, then we'd be married today. I mean, that, it's but I could see some of the other cast members saying stuff like this, and they have said stuff like this in a scenario like this. So, and that's extreme, but there are other things that Haley could be saying. Haley is putting hands out, tone of voice, being there for, but because Haley is also suffering. Something is ending for her as well, and that is not happening. Now Haley should be doing her best, but Haley's going through something. There's a lot of pain there, and uncertainty and grief. They're both grieving, and also for Pilar to be dealing with it in this way. There's so many things you could imagine someone in Pilar's shoes doing and saying that would be not as differentiated and mature. I wouldn't fault someone in Pilar's shoes for doing a little bit more immaturity and lack of differentiation and hostility. I think it's normal, but we don't say any of that, like none. And the fact that she's being vulnerable and allowing herself to be vulnerable for her own sake and in front of Haley, a lot of people wouldn't want to reveal that. So this is a true model breakup. It happens.
We're not aligning.
I don't think that's true at all. I think that you could put in more effort. I think that that deep down. It feels like we're roommates or friends. It's because we're not doing the romantic stuff.
I don't know how to figure this out.
Okay, so they've been discussing this for a while, and I thought I would chime in with something, but I kept waiting for something to grab onto in terms of exactly what they're saying. I don't think they even understand each other. I think there's even a chance they don't understand themselves enough to describe what's going on, which isn't unusual. But I don't know. At the very least, I know I don't understand what they're actually talking about. And I'm pretty sure they don't understand each other. And I think they know they don't understand each other. So Marita has been communicating that, sorry. Marita has been saying that with Brittany showed up and was romantic, and it was effortless. And they talked about flowers and this kind of thing, but usually it's more than that. It's not just flowers. It's about, do I feel loved? And then Marita says more like friends. So if I were to take a guess, I would say that they just have different styles that they want to be in a relationship. Or there's other possibilities, where Ashley is there for Marita and does love Marita, but Marita just doesn't feel love and is having a hard time letting go of the relationship, maybe. I don't know. That wouldn't be the first time that would happen. And instead is just kind of in a confused state of, I just feel like I'll tell you that a good portion of breakups, I don't know, anecdotally, maybe 30%, maybe more, there will be a span of time where one person will be complaining a lot. And most of the complaining is fueled by the fact that they themselves have fallen out of love and they just don't know that yet, or they have a hard time admitting that to themselves, or they might even be legitimately knowing that to some extent and hoping to change the relationship such that they'll fall back in love or something. But I think the cases that I'm thinking of, the individual has fallen out of love and doesn't know how to interpret it. Sometimes it's because, especially if it's the first time you've been 5 years into a relationship, you might not know what a 5-year-old love feels like, because you'll hear things from people saying that, well, it changes, it becomes deeper, but you also lose the passion, that kind of stuff. And you might interpret this new felt sense of love as, well, this is what everyone goes through, right? And you might not know. So I think there's a good chance that Marita has just fallen out of love. And, maybe for understandable reasons, I don't know. Because Marita is not being specific. she's not, I would understand it more if Marita said, okay, let me give you a specific. So when I came home that one day and I was struggling and you just, there's been a little bit of talk about that kind of stuff. Anyway, at the very least, the theme is that it's continuing and there has been no drastic change in the position that they have. Marita is still feeling underappreciated or unloved or neglected or something, which is fine. And Ashley is confused and is claiming that she does love Marita and that Marita is impossible to please or that Marita isn't being clear or something. So I don't know what this means. I had thought prior to even coming on the show that they seemed mostly broken up in all but name, and I still kind of think that.
I am so rough around the edges.
I just need a break for a minute.
Where are you going?
I will say that I don't know, but this would fit the template, so to speak, of someone in Marita's shoes who is displacing, in that the issue isn't really between her and Ashley, but has to do with someone from her past. And she is seeing everything through that lens. I don't want to discount Marita's position. There's some evidence that Ashley is a little shut down and not forward, not doesn't put effort, might be a little cut off or something from her own emotions or spontaneity or something. But I will say that I've worked with cases where someone is seeing their partner in a particular way, and later on we will collaboratively develop the conceptualization that the person in Marita's shoes was displacing. At the very least exaggerating, if not just making stuff up essentially about what's happening when they're not happening, but they haven't dealt with those traumas from their past and they're trying to work it out in the future and it's confusing them and they see the trauma occurring in the moment when it's not really occurring. They might even try to manufacture it through projective identification. Listen to my episodes on projective identification and reenactments and that kind of stuff, which happens. We all do it to some extent. So I'll put that out there. But I would think that from the Ashley side, if she was really invested, she would go to Marita right now and say, I love you and I want to be with you. And I don't know exactly what you're complaining about, but I do know that I love you. And, so whenever they talk about this, there doesn't seem to be anything like that. So I think that kind of says something. I don't know. I was really, they talked about this for a while and I was just like, okay, we're finally going to get some like specifics. I'll have something to grab onto, but I don't know. Sky's the limit in terms of what's really happening. They are continuing to be kind of vague in their descriptions and they seem to say the same similar things over and over again. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.